So here we are back on the bench. I've got the cowling, of course, off the airplane and flipped upside down. And this is that area that I was talking about where there are the hinge does not continue through this area here. And again, this is so that with the oil door open, you reach in through the oil door and you can grab these pins and pull them out through the oil door. This one, you kind of reach in and push it out until it disengages from the hinge, and then you pull it out through the oil door. But like I said, that's mildly difficult to get them in. So like I said, I saw on the internet a modification where you can cut out a section of the cowling and you can grab these pins from the outside and just pull them out. So that's what I'm going to work on now. So you can see that I've got my hinge pins have been modified. I just curled them up in a loop, and I'll show you that in detail here in a minute. And that just makes it a nice compact size for the opening. You only need an opening big enough to grab the hinge pin. So I rolled these up. This one is actually going to get redone because it's got a flat spot right here. I'll talk about that here in a minute as well. Rolled them up, and after I had them rolled, of course, I've reinstalled them into the hinges, and I figured out where I want to have them. This one is probably going to end up more like here. You can position them anywhere you want inside here. Now, let me back up. If you're going to do this mod from scratch, most people do it in the center of the cowling because it's nice and flat. This is the only place that I can do it without redoing this entire cowling. It's easiest for me just to cut out the area that I have. Like I said, this was originally set up per the plans. If I wanted to do it in the middle, of course, I'd have to redo all these hinges, and I'm not going to do that. So you have the option of doing it in the center or anywhere you want if you're doing it from scratch. I like this better. If I was going to do this from scratch, I believe I would still put it here, or I would put it here on the opposite side, over in here somewhere. It's just easier to get to rather than having to climb up and get on top of the cowling to get to your hinge pins. With them on the side, you can be on the ground. You don't need a step stool or anything, and it's just a lot easier. It's more convenient because it's closer to you. So I like it here. I'm going to leave it just like it is. Got the hinge pins in place. The opening kind of dictates how big I can cut out the hatch area, and you can see that here. And then, of course, these hinge pins fit inside of that box nicely. One thing you want to be aware of, this pin is nice and short, so you can have a lot of length here on the pin itself. So this pin could pretty much sit inside this box anywhere that it wants, and you'll still have plenty of pins sticking out here. The problem that I have is this pin is very, very long. And I'm using stainless steel welding rod, and the welding rod only comes so long in length, at least the ones that I have. So even if I do not cut any length off of the welding rod and I make this curl as close to the end of the rod as I can get it, it's just barely long enough to grab all of the knuckles. So you can see where I'm going to cut out this opening. So this hinge pin can only be over to about there-ish, because the box is going to be here. And with it in this location, you can see there's going to be there's going to be a knuckle here from the hinge that's attached to the fuselage. You can see that it does engage. The hinge pin will engage that knuckle. But if this was any shorter, this wouldn't engage. So you have to be mindful of that. If you do your hatch in the center of the cowling, you'll have plenty of hinge pin length for both sides, no problem. So this one is going to have to be basically where it is. If I pull it into the center of the box, it's going to make it too short on that end. So since I'm going to have this one out at the end, I'm going to have this one at the end. I'm not going to bring this one in toward the center. I'm going to leave it spaced out here, just like this one, inside the box. So my plan is this. I'm going to cut this out of the cowling. I've already formed, here he is. I've already formed my cover. I just bent this by hand. This is 32 thousandths 2024 aluminum. It's not very pretty, doesn't need to be, but it will work. And then that is going to basically sit like this, right? Problem is, I've got these hinges here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some spare hinge. I'm going to cut the knuckles off, and then this body of the hinge is going to make up a perimeter spacer. This is the same hinge as this. So this is the same thickness as this hinge. And this will just go around the box like that, all the way around. It will make a frame around this cutout. It will strengthen the cutout area itself, and it will also be the same height as the hinges, so this box will have something to mount to. And then at that point, the whole assembly can be flipped over, and I've already made some spacers. These are gonna go in here. These are actually going to be attached to the lid that I haven't made yet. And when you put the lid on, these will drop down into the hinge pins. Keep the hinge pins in place. Provide an area for screws so I can take the screws out and take the cover off to get to the hinge pins. These will come off. These are going to be attached to the cover, so these will come off with the cover, and you can easily grab the pin. If I were to mount these inside like this, you'd have to pull the pin up and off of these to pull it out. And I will get to all of that later. This is just a lot of thinking out loud and a lot of potential prototype work just to see if the idea will work. Hinge pins made, cover made. My next thing is to cut this out. I'm going to cut this opening, and then I'm going to start fitting my frame around here, and then I can start fitting the box. The other thing I wanted to talk about, you can, like I said, this one's going to get remade because it has a flat spot. The spacers will fit in here nicely. There's plenty of slot for them to drop in. Not so much on this one because of that flat spot. So I'm going to remake this pin. But these spacers, they're just 6061 aluminum, machined to fit inside of the hinge pin. Let me get to cutting some fiberglass, and I'll talk to you guys later. Alrighty, so now I've got the opening cut. This is just a rough cut. I haven't filed anything. I haven't cleaned up any edges or anything like that. It's just a rough cut to the line. And I've been modifying my box a little bit. You can see that I've got a cutout on each tab. That's to clear the rivet here and here. And I also cut back these ears. So this ear used to come all the way up to this edge. It used to be longer here. And I've cut out this corner, and I've done the same on this one. This tab used to come all the way out to this front edge, and I just cut out that area there, and that was to clear the knuckle here and the knuckle here. You'll note that when I made the box, I made 3 mounting tabs, and I also bent this front edge here. Rather than leaving this open, I bent that front edge this way, this front edge here. And that's because I want this to be a box. So when it's in place, I want there to be an edge here. I don't want this to be open, so I bent this down. Can I get better lighting? So I bent that down to make more of a box. There's a better shot right there. A couple things to keep in mind. You can make this cutout as big as you want it. It can be really long, it can be really deep, but you'll want to support it somehow when it's done. You want it big enough that you can pull the hinges out from the outside. And of course you want to make your box to match. I'm trying to keep mine as small as possible for integrity. I don't need a ginormous box just to pull pins out. And I just like to keep things nice and concise. So there's the opening. This is the box. You can see how I made the notch here. Again, that was for the knuckle, to clear the knuckle. It's also going to help clear the hinge pin, and I'll get to that in a moment. Same on this side, that notch. Here's the cutout for the rivet. There's a cutout for the rivet. And you can see that the box still lines up with my reference mark. I got a reference mark there, and I've got a reference mark there. Another thing, of course, you've got this front edge or this aft edge of the cowling, right? The fuselage comes up to this. You want to maintain that edge through the box. So make sure that your box is not overhanging the fuselage like that. So you want to keep everything kind of in plane in this orientation. So now I've got my hole roughly cut. I've got the box roughly fitted in place. I want to make up the spacers. Where'd my spacer go? I'm going to modify this hinge so that it will go underneath the 3 tabs that make up the box. So this will, in effect, this will sit like that. All the way around, just like that. So I'm going to cut up the hinge and get that ready to be my spacer. And then ultimately, I'm going to I'll drill a hole in the tab here. I'll probably put 4 rivet holes along this back edge and then another rivet hole here. And then the frame, the 3 pieces of the frame will get riveted. We'll get fuel tank sealant, so I'll put fuel tank sealant here. I'll put the spacers down, put fuel tank sealant on top of the spacers, and then put my box down and then rivet everything together. They'll be riveted, of course, from the outside with flush head rivets. And it'll be just the same as the hinge itself. The flush head will be on the outside, of course. So right now I'm going to start making up my spacers. That way I can get this box to lay on here the way that it needs to lay. And then I can start drilling holes and I can start using clecos. And then I can flip the whole thing back over and see how the pins will run. You can see that it looks like obviously the pins are going to have to come through the box. I'll probably have to cut out a notch in this area here for the pin to actually slide through. But I'll get to that after I make up the spacers, because right now this could be just about anywhere. So I want to get this drilled and clecoed with the spacers, and then I'll know exactly where I need to notch on both sides for the pins to clear. All right, let me get to work and I'll talk to you guys here shortly.